Hello again, welcome to Jesse's Book Corner. Today we'll be discussing Life of Pi by Jan Mattel. That's probably backwards for you. And today we're going to be discussing the probability of pi. And pi, 3.14159, has a probability of 1 to 1. It exists. It is the ratio of a circle's diameter to its circumference. But we're talking about the character Pi in the Life of Pi, and we're talking about specifically in part 2 of the book. And there's a little like tiger thing down there. We're talking about how the probability of him being shipwrecked is very, very low. And the reason we're talking about this is because while I've been reading this book, I've been thinking about a previous book in the previous video, The Things They Carried. The other things they carry, there's this theme of story reality versus truth reality, and it's the whole thing about whether the book is fiction or non-fiction. And it shows up in this book too, because throughout the shipwreck, I mean, there's all these different things that happen, and you continually question whether any of these things could be true. So I'm going to investigate that today. The first one we're going to start out with is the probability of the actual shipwreck. Now what I wanted to do was find out a bunch of like statistics and be like, the probability of a shipwreck is 1 in exactly 2 million. No, but I don't have those because they're very hard to find, and I'd probably have to conduct a life's worth of research before I figured out the actual probabilities. And I was going to be like, it's actually 1,000 times more difficult to be shipwrecked than to win the lottery. But again, I don't have those. Lots of ships have been shipwrecked, including the Titanic, the most famous shipwrecks. And so, when I first thought about it, I thought the probability is low of that happening, but it wasn't unbelievable, so I still thought the book could be non-fiction. And then, during the shipwreck, Pi is thrown overboard by the crewmates and lands on the lifeboat, where he will be spending the next 200-some days of his life on the Pacific. Poor Pi. Anyway, he's on the boat, and he falls and he lands on the tarpaulin, the tarp thing, and I thought the probability of him hitting the tarp and surviving was pretty low. I mean, I don't know how far the boat's fall was because it doesn't tell me, and I just wouldn't know. So that's a problem. So shipwreck and falling to the tarpaulin, two big things. Another thing, at this category of things that sort of might have happened but have a low probability. Shipwreck's one of them, tarpaulin's one of them. Another one of them, Pi goes blind. And I thought that it was a little bit weird how this happened. I really didn't think that this sort of thing should happen. But I did some research, and the thing was he got blind because of cataract, C-A-T-A-R-A-C-T, and the reason of cataract was UV sunlight exposure. So it's not that bad, it could happen, and that's probably the reason Pi went blind. So I was a little bit doubtful about that probability. One thing that I didn't like, which has a very low probability, is that at the very end of part 2, Pi just lands on Mexico, and that's not very good. I didn't like that, because the current that he's on, let me show you. This is a picture of all the currents and stuff. It's also going to be backwards for you, which is pretty bad. But the current he's traveling is the one right here, the orange arrow, the Pacific Equatorial Countercurrent. And he's going from over here in, this is backwards, isn't it? He's going from over here in India, and this India, and he left from somewhere over here. He goes through and he gets shipwrecked about where that arrow starts. Yeah, somewhere around there. And he's going all the way and ends up in Mexico, which, so since he's traveling that current, which, as the book says, he's traveling that current, landing in Mexico is very improbable, and I don't like how the book puts it there. So, that's not so good. A big part of the probability of Pi's journey is all the animals and life he meets on the way. The first one that he meets is, of course, Richard Parker, the tiger, and the whole thing of the zoo animals, just the zoo animals coming on and landing in the boat and being in the boat with him. First of all, they are transporting zoo animals, which gives it a sort of likelihood. So, that the animals would end up on the boat, pretty good likelihood, but that all 4 animals, the orangutan, the zebra, the hyena, and the tiger, being Richard Parker, that Pi finds, all of them being on the boat is very improbable. I don't think that should have happened. So, the tiger being on there is okay. One thing about Richard Parker is the training of the tiger. Now, he goes into deep depth of this with the whole training thing. So I think because of the depth that he goes in, all the things that he says, and how he would train a tiger, it's like a circus ring, it's like a zoo, then I think the training is pretty probable. So the tiger being in there, in this case, even though it wouldn't seem like it, is pretty probable. So, that's good. And then the hyena and zebra are both just kind of there. The zebra jumps off the boat and lands in it, and the hyena gets there before. Both of them have about the same probability. Once again, transporting zoo animals. Of the 4 aforementioned animals, the orangutan is the most improbable one. Orangutan Orange Juice, that's her name, Orange Juice. Orange Juice happens to land up on the lifeboat is that she travels there in her floating banana boat. Bananas filled with 4 feeding the animals on the boat filled with spiders, and that's not a good thing because it just happens that the banana boat and the lifeboat go together in the one place with Pi and the orangutan and everyone else. I just think that's very not likely, and that causes me to doubt the truth of the book a little bit. I mean, they are traveling in the same current, but the 2 small bits coming together, it's just not very likely. Another one, some other animals that Pi meets are the sharks. And he meets a couple of sharks. He meets blue sharks and mako sharks and tiger sharks. Actually, tiger shark only one. And white tip sharks. And so what I did was I Googled where they live. And the blue lives in that area. The area of the current. Yes, the blue shark lives in the area of the current, so that one he could have met. The white tip also lives in the area of the current at times. That one he could have met. The tiger shark is a little less probable, but he also lives in the area, and so does mako. Now, that means that all the sharks that he meets could have been met in a person with his situation, and that is... Next one are the turtles. Turtles go... And there he meets the hawksbill turtle and the green seed turtle. And the hawksbill turtles and the green seed turtles I also Googled and I also looked them up, and they also both live in the area where Pi was traveling. So that is also good. It's the same situation as the sharks. And he eats them. Now the fish, the Dorados, are the most prominent fish, and the Dorados could have lived there. They live in a lot of different places, and they, according to the internet, all their mating and reproduction and egg stuff all happens in the warm currents. So that could have happened in the Pacific equatorial countercurrent. That the Dorados were there, and really the current really helps with him meeting all of the animals that were not off the boat, not the zoo animals, just the marine animals, because I would think, at least, like in Finding Nemo, the current pulls all of the sea animals together. But the real time that I am very suspicious of this book is when he meets the carnivorous algae. And I did some Googling on this too, because I was like, carnivorous algae, that's something that could really happen, because it's a thing. But in all reality, carnivorous algae does not exist. Well, it does exist. What it exists as is, you know, on a minute scale, and they come and they eat little fishies, and just as like little, but they do sometimes eat meat, sometimes they eat each other, the algae eats each other, but a quantity of carnivorous algae that Pi finds on his travels. It will be very rare to find. I don't think that exists. And actually at the beginning of the chapter where he finds them, he says, most people won't believe that I found this. I want to take some samples back. And then he loses the samples. It's like, I made a new discovery. I don't believe it. No. I don't think that those actually exist. To further disprove this, of course, there are meerkats on the algae island. And of course, they go up into the trees and sleep all cuddly with Pi. And don't get eaten by the carnivorous algae. And the problem with that is that meerkats live in the desert. You know, Timon. So them, a feasible colony of meerkats living in the ocean on carnivorous algae and eating fish and sleeping in trees, all those things meerkats do not do. They are not built for doing that. Ooh. So I don't believe that the meerkats could exist either. So the whole chapter of the carnivorous algae completely fake and made up. That's my opinion, at least, from what I researched and what I know. That's not an actual thing. That can't exist. So, the animals, on the whole, pretty unlikely that they could be there. Most exist in that habitat. Zoo animals could be there. Carnivorous algae, definitely not. But those things could be there, but it makes the whole book less probable. Also, the very last thing is the probability of things passing by him. He meets different things of different sizes. The biggest is probably the oil tanker, which he meets and he tries to shoot a flare and see, I'm here, oil tanker, rescue me! But the oil tanker does not recognize him, and the probability of him meeting an oil tanker, I'm not really sure on this one, because I don't know the past of the boats at that point in history, so it could happen, I guess. That's an iffy one. He also meets a whale, which is another large object. And the final thing is the very, very improbable meeting of the other man that Pi sees. Pi sees this other man who, first of all, though, he's in his mind's not functioning right because he hasn't been eating or drinking. And he meets this. First he talks to Richard Parker, which is not good because his mind is not in a good place. And then this is all while he's blind, talks to another man in another boat who has a boot that he wants to sell for cigarettes. And Pies eat the cigarettes, the other guy has eaten the boot, and so they don't have anything to sell. This whole thing. But the probability of him actually meeting this guy is so low that I cannot believe that it happened. Because, I mean, he meets an oil tanker, he meets a whale, he meets all this marine life, but another survival thing, I mean, the probability of a person in the exact same position of Pi just, like, multiplies the improbability of this book by, like, 1,000 billion. So that happening, I don't know. That doesn't happen. So, yeah. So through all these things, things that he passes or sees or experiences, most of them are not that probable. Which leaves me to believe that this story is not true, even though it's set up in a way that it could be feasible. Now, on the back of the book, right here, again backwards, it says fiction. So the book actually says that it's fiction, which kind of puts my whole video like, look at that fool, he's just proving something that already exists as a fact, right? So that this really could happen, no. Not thinking that this could happen, personally. So I hope that this project was informative and that I have now a conclusion whether or not I think these things happened, and it's fiction. So the probability of pi? Not very probable, my friend. Not very probable.